Fat loss coach reacts to Fit for TV, the reality of the biggest loser. Sean here from Fit Fusion Brotherhood. I'm a fat loss coach who helps regular guys lose weight without crash dieting. And today we're going to talk about that new documentary on Netflix about the biggest loser, which is all about crash dieting. So we're going to talk about what they got right, what they totally messed up on, and what I would have done instead. So The Biggest Loser has been receiving a lot of hate over the years, even more so recently now that this documentary has come out. Now, I do think there's a lot of blame that deserves to go towards The Biggest Loser, but at the same time, as someone who's been on the other end of this, someone who's actually run weight loss challenges before, I can empathize with some of the things that happened, and a lot of the things that happened were inevitable. Keep in mind that this isn't just a Biggest Loser thing. A lot of this basically mirrors what happens in the weight loss industry. Now, there's problems in and of itself with regards to that, but that's another video for another time. Okay, so first let's talk about the things that I really didn't like, that I did have a problem with. Exercise for sure. They over-exercised way too much. One woman, I think her name was Tracy, ended up doing one of the 1 mile run on the beach and got rhabdo. So she pushed herself so hard that her muscles broke down and she ended up getting a condition that almost killed her. And this is something that if you have coaches and trainers around, there's no excuse to ever get to that point. So they were also talking about exercising hours every single day. And we're talking about people who have probably been sedentary for years or decades prior to that. And now all of a sudden they're overtraining just a crazy amount. So there's just no excuse to be exercising that much. There's no need to exercise that much. One of the things the physician even said was the reason they exercise so much was to use it as an appetite suppressant, which in small doses can be useful, but when you're exercising that much, it's no longer healthy. It's actually really bad for your body. And then the second part, of course, is the diet. You hear a lot of people mention they were eating 800 calories a day or even starving themselves for days. And the doctor comes in and basically said he was recommending 1,200 calories for women, 1,500 calories for men, which in my opinion is still way too low, especially when you're talking about people who are 300, 400, 500 pounds. But at least then you would have the physician's recommendations. But obviously that was more of a formality and people ended up cutting way too many calories way too fast. Now, the problem is anytime you have a competition, anytime you have a TV show in front of millions, you're going to quickly get people shift from healthy to obsessive real quick. As someone who's run many weight loss challenges before in the past, I've noticed this myself. Even in the documentary, the person who won season 1, I believe it was, basically mentioned that himself. He said he went from trying to be very healthy to only caring about winning. And then what happens is all those healthy habits that you started off in the beginning with end up being obsessive, unhealthy habits that you'll do anything at all costs to win that challenge. So those are some of the unhealthy measures that they took that I really didn't like, I didn't really agree with. So next, let's talk about some of the results and how that came about. No surprise here, but in a show called The Biggest Loser, guess what? People lost a lot of weight. We're talking about hundreds of pounds in just a few months. And it's not necessarily surprising because the bigger you are, if someone has hundreds of pounds to lose, it's much easier for them to lose a bunch of weight in a really short period of time. So I'm not necessarily surprised. That in and of itself doesn't necessarily concern me either. It's more of what are the habits and lifestyle that they have to do in order to lose that weight. Is it conducive to long-term success? Are they sacrificing long-term consequences for short-term gain? And I think that's obviously what ended up happening here. Two issues when you lose weight that fast. The first one, which I'm going to get to in a bit, is you actually slow down your metabolism. We have something called metabolic adaptation, which I will explain. And then the second thing, you're also sacrificing muscle. So you might lose weight, but you're going to slow down your metabolism, you're going to lose muscle, you're going to feel worse, and in the end, you're probably going to look worse. Next, let's talk about some accountability and shame, another thing that gets a lot of criticism from the show. Now, the fitness industry has a reputation for being run almost like a drill sergeant or a boot camp where tough love is the name of the game. You have these really obnoxious trainers yelling at you, basically getting you to do what they want at all costs. The issue with this is I don't think it's an accurate reflection of the fitness industry in general, and I think they're just perpetuating stereotypes that no longer exist. Now, with that being said, there are some coaches out there like Jillian Michaels who like to get up in people's face and basically berate you, yell at you, and give you the quote-unquote tough love. I personally don't like this at all. It's not my style. I would never hire a trainer that had that style, but there are people that actually receive that kind of style pretty well. In fact, I've had people literally leave my gym because none of our coaches were like that. We're the drill sergeant type of person. So for me personally, I'm all about positive reinforcement. I don't like to see those type of stereotypes perpetuated in the fitness industry, but there are some people that genuinely enjoy it. And that's the difficult part about coaching in groups, is there's so many different personality types and you have to almost be someone for everyone. And it can be a little bit challenging. I just don't like that stereotype necessarily. And then the second issue here that I have with the shame, the accountability, would just be like those temptation challenges that they had. Now, I actually think it's a pretty good idea to invite some of these temptations, because at the end of the day, they're in this really controlled environment where they get to eat healthy foods and exercise and be in a motivational environment all the time. In the outside world, it's not going to be like that. So it's a good idea to kind of test them with some temptations, but obviously they went overboard. They sensationalized it. They tried to shame the contestants, which I don't ever think is a good idea. And again, the issue with this is that it's a TV show and they need to sensationalize it. So they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place here. I understand why they did it. I don't support it at all. I don't think anyone deserves to be humiliated on TV. So temptations, good idea. The way they did it, not so much. And one of the biggest takeaways and maybe criticisms about the entire show and the documentary was that the majority of contestants put on the weight back and also kind of destroyed their metabolism in the process. So the New York Times did an article that confirmed this, showing that most contestants did gain the weight back and had a metabolism that was disproportionately lower than it otherwise should have been. This is a concept called metabolic adaptation, and it does exist and it's very common. So basically, metabolic adaptation states the more aggressively you lose weight, the bigger the hit your metabolism takes. And we know The Biggest Loser was very aggressive with the weight loss, so it's no surprise that there was a big adaptation there. However, what they didn't mention is anytime anyone loses weight, your metabolism will slow down or get lower, your metabolic rate. This is true whether you're losing 5 pounds, 10 pounds, or hundreds of pounds. And we're talking about people who lost hundreds of pounds. So even if they did it in a very slow, sustainable way, their metabolism is going to take a huge hit regardless. Would it have been as significant as, The Biggest Loser with the huge aggressive weight cuts? Probably not, but it still would have been a major obstacle to overcome. So I do have a little bit of an issue with people making such a big deal of that claim, because I think anytime you have hundreds of pounds and you lose that weight, your metabolism is going to be much slower afterwards, regardless of how you do it. That's not me justifying the way they did it, because absolutely they should have done it more controlled. And the reason they gained the weight back had less to do with their metabolism, because if they actually maintained that lifestyle, they wouldn't have gained weight. The big problem, and this is one of my big issues with the show, is it was unsustainable. How were they expected to maintain that lifestyle? So what ended up happening is the show ended, coaches are gone, nutritionists are gone, and then they're put back into this environment that basically allowed them to gain weight in the first place. So they're around the same people, the same food triggers. All of these things that have been perpetuated for years and decades are suddenly back into play, and then they probably ended up reverting back to those old habits. Now with the slower metabolism, it makes it even easier to gain the weight. Okay, so it wasn't the metabolism that caused them to gain the weight, it was the change in environment. So you went from a very controlled environment to something that was back to where you kind of gained the weight in the first place. It's a tricky one, because what is a TV show supposed to do? What is a coach supposed to do? This is something that we struggle with all the time. The criticism I have here is they didn't really discuss maintenance at all. There was no aftercare strategy, but this is something that happens all the time. In fact, up to 95% of people who lose weight end up gaining weight back in the first place. So it's very easy to criticize The Biggest Loser, but this isn't just a Biggest Loser problem. This is a worldwide problem. So what would I do? Okay, so what should they have done instead? And it's a very difficult thing to answer, because they have two things working against them right away that makes these results almost inevitable. The first one is it's a TV show. So being a TV show, people are going to be more motivated than ever before to do really well, because they realize millions of people are watching, and they also want to make it as sensationalized as possible, right? They have that stress of making sure that they get results. Even that executive was basically terrified of an NBC CEO coming and noticing that no one lost weight. So they wanted people to lose weight at all costs. And as someone who's run these challenges before, I can absolutely relate. Which brings me to the next point, the fact that it was a challenge. Anytime weight loss becomes a challenge, you're going to get people doing things way too aggressively. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, a catch-22 if you will, because on one hand, these challenges and the TV show sparks a ton of motivation for people. It elicits action. It gets people to get started and achieve some amazing results. And that's a good thing in my opinion. Then the problem is the opposite side of that, is it gets people to go from those healthy lifestyles to doing something that's completely unhealthy, basically doing anything they can at the expense of their health in order to win that challenge, right? And then that's when you start to see those negative behaviors, things become unsustainable, and the chances of relapsing and gaining the weight back is super high. Also, some of those the shame tactics I wouldn't have included as well. Again, they do it because it's a TV show. It's the stereotype of the fitness industry. It's what people want to see. People want to see that shock factor type of thing. But I think when you're giving someone positive reinforcement, you're changing their identity in a positive way rather than just shaming them into being something that they're not comfortable doing. So I would have done that differently. But again, when you're operating under a TV show, it's totally different. And it's whatever you can do to bring as much entertainment as possible. And then finally, this is the most important part, but it's very difficult to do from their point of view, is understand the importance of maintenance and environment. Because we had the same issue. We would run these body transformation challenges, people would crush it, get great results, and then we'd see them a year later and they'd gain all the way back. What we ended up doing, and this didn't completely solve the problem, but it did help, is we really emphasized and stressed the importance of maintenance and being able to keep it off long term. And we discussed that during the challenge, after the challenge, and we even incentivized people that had long-term approaches as well, and sustainable approaches. So I'm not sure what they could have done, because when you're a TV show, you only have a certain amount of time that you film, and then you're basically cut off. If this was an actual coaching program, it would have been much better for them to actually focus on something long-term. But either way, they should have had some sort of education, awareness, telling people the risks and the probability of gaining that weight back, why it happens, and what they could have done instead to make sure that doesn't happen, because it's so common. And if you don't discuss it and if you don't prepare people for it, then the chances of it happening almost certain. So overall, I did think the documentary was well done. It was obviously very biased in a way that they wanted to make it seem kind of controversial and negative and all that stuff, which I totally understand. This documentary and Biggest Loser in general has been getting a lot of hate, especially from people in the industry, which I can understand. I have very similar thoughts to how they approach some of the things, especially the workouts, the nutrition, the shaming, that kind of stuff. I totally agree with. But as someone who's been on the other end of it, as someone who's run these challenges and really tried everything I can to make sure that it works long term, not just short term, we still have a lot of issues and a lot of progress that we need to get to in order to really prevent these same issues happening over and over again. Because like I said, this isn't just a Biggest Loser problem, it's a worldwide issue. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do like videos like this, do us a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.